So in the first lesson, we spoke about the subsets of accounting, what management accounting really means, the role of a management accountant. But now we move on to one of the major skills that any management accountant needs to portray, which is the classification of costs. Now, in order to understand, in order to add value, in order to make decisions, a management accountant needs to know what the different types of costs are for a particular product or for the business to make his decisions. So he needs to understand the costs first. Understanding costs is vital for this role, and costs can be classified into three main categories again. Now you can identify and split any cost in any of these three categories or by using any of these three categories. First being behavior, you can divide costs based on behavior, you can divide costs based on elements, and you can divide costs based on the nature of the costs. We will be taking each one by one to help you develop an understanding of the same. Firstly, classification of costs according to their behavior. So how do they behave? And based on that, we will split the different costs that a business can experience. So in cost accounting, we typically classify costs by three types under the behavior category. So in the behavior category, costs can be of three types. The first being fixed costs. These costs are ones that do not change as the activity level changes. For a very simple example, let's say you rented out an office. In that office or factory space, you make 1000 pencils. If you start making 2000 pencils in the same space, does your rent increase? I don't think so. It remains the same, right? So these are fixed costs which do not change as the activity level changes. Whatever you do, how much you make, you have to pay those costs. Those are your fixed costs. Second, you have variable costs. Now, variable costs are ones which change in the direct proportion to the activity level. Again, simple example, if you made 1000 pencils, then for each pencil you would need wood, right? Now, if you make 1000 pencils, you will need wood for 1000 pencils. If you make 2000 pencils, you will need wood for 2000 pencils. So your costs are changing according to the level of activity. These are called variable costs. Third, you have semi-variable costs as well, which means they have fixed elements as well as variable elements. Now, you might be wondering, what are the examples then? Examples in normal life are gas and electricity, which means you have to pay a fixed amount even if you don't use it. Just for the connection, you are supposed to pay a small fixed amount. And then as much as you use, you need to pay. So there is a fixed element and then there is a variable element included depending on your consumption. So if you're looking at behavior, you have three categories: fixed, which remain fixed; variable, which change with the level of activity; and third, semi-variable. Next, we break down the costs according to cost elements. The first category was based on behavior. The second category is based on elements. Now, elements means, in general words as well, means parts. So over here, you are breaking down the costs based on different parts. The first one being material costs. So any cost related to procuring the material becomes material cost. Simple example, if I'm making pencils, the wood which I'm going to buy to make those pencils becomes my material cost. Second, I have labor costs. So labor costs are costs of the people working for the organization. They include wages, salaries, and other employment related costs. So these is the classification or the breakdown based on your cost elements. Third, you have overhead costs. Now, overhead costs are ones which are needed to run the business. For example, accounting fees, insurance, interest, legal fees, rent, repairs, supplies. These are all overheads that your business has to incur to make sure that it's run well. So first we had division based on behavior. Then we had division based on the elements. Third, we have division based on nature. Now, nature generally divides costs into two categories only: direct nature or direct costs and indirect nature or indirect costs. Now, direct costs are ones which are directly traced to the cost object. For example, suppose that a furniture maker is determining the cost of a wooden table. Every single cost that will be incurred for the manufacture of that table, for making that table, becomes direct cost. So wood cost, screws, metal hand drawers, any kind of rubber casing that is put, all of that which is specifically for this wooden table becomes a direct cost, directly related to that cost object. Second, there can be indirect costs, costs which are not directly traced to a single object. For example, electricity, quality inspection, or production overheads. These are all indirect. You can't say that making this one wooden table took me 5 seconds or 10 seconds in a machine, so the electricity cost will be divided based on time. It becomes very arbitrary to divide it that way, right? So indirect costs are ones which cannot be directly traced to a single cost object. They are very generic in nature. So what we learned in this lesson is that for a management accountant to make good decisions, he will have to know what the costs are. And to understand these costs, you can divide them into different categories based on behavior, based on elements, and based on nature.